Hey guys, welcome back to another video. We're going to be working on the Chevy C10. Back in the day, this thing came with a 250 inline 6, so it had the Monojet single barrel carb. And so what I did is I bought a carburetor kit and we're going to do a rebuild today. I'm not going to do a complete rebuild because I already did it, but I also wanted to take it apart and show you guys what you can look for if your truck isn't idling right. And then also at the end of the video, we're going to be doing some vacuum testing. And then I also want to talk to you about a idle stop solenoid because I've had issues with that for a while now and I couldn't quite get it to work right. So I'm going to share what I found out on that as well. So we're going to take the carburetor off outside so we don't get all the fumes in the garage. So without further ado, let's get this thing in the shop. So here's the carburetor itself. There's only a couple things that I really want to show you on the outside that you're going to have to be aware of. This is your fuel inlet. This is your vacuum brake. This is your electronic choke, idle stop solenoid, and then your throttle assembly here. And then the vacuum line. And then on this side right here, on the bottom here is where we're going to do a vacuum test. So basically, pop this cap off, hook a vacuum gauge up there, and then you're going to adjust this screw to get the correct reading. And I'll show you that when the carburetor is back on the truck and running. But for right now, we're just going to dive into the top end here. There's basically three parts to this carburetor: a top, a mid-body, and then a lower. But yeah, let's just dive right on in. So we're going to start popping screws off here, just a flat blade. But I also wanted to say that I have fully rebuilt this carburetor already. It's a lot more complex than what I'm used to working on with dirt bike carburetors and stuff like that. But for the most part, this is super simple and it's kind of fun to do. So here's our vacuum brake. Set that to the side. Disconnect this vacuum line. Now we're going to pop our electronic choke off. Before we do that, we're going to have to take this throttle plate off here to get to the screws to take the choke off as well. Forgot to mention that. There's only two screws holding it, and then this last one here on the bottom, literally just have to loosen, and you can pop this plate off like so. And now we can get to our choke screws. Okay. Now working with these linkages, they're kind of tricky. You kind of have to turn it in one way, and you'll see what I'm talking about, but there's these little pins right here, and those are able to lock into little grooves with slots. So just be aware of that. Pop that out. And now we can take this whole assembly off here. So we're going to take our gasket off, just like so. And now there's a lot going on here. This kind of confused me at first, but once you dig into it, it's really not that bad. I'm just gonna show you what all these ports do on the top of the carb here. So here's obviously our float, and that literally just comes out like this. When you take it out, there's going to be a needle right here, and that clip is literally just hung on by a little tiny piece of wire. Comes out like that. Set that down, and then your lever right there, then your float comes out. And some of these floats are plastic. I don't know exactly what material it is, but I would definitely recommend a brass one because the brass ones usually don't soak up anything, whereas the plastic ones over time, especially if the truck is old, will. So I would just replace it with a brass one, but if you feel like it's still good, you can run it, but just be aware of that. You can also shake it around and make sure there's no gasoline in there. This one is good, so set that aside. And then right here is obviously our main jet where the needle sits into. So this right here is called a main discharge. I'll show you guys how to take that out. And this little hole next to it is called the pump discharge. This is called the idle compressor air inlet. This is part of the choke. This is a vacuum port, I guess you would call it. And right here is your idle tube. This is going to be very important for us. This little tube right here can make or break your carburetor as far as when it starts up and idles. This is called the main well air bleed. Now right here is your power piston, and this right here is basically a pump. It's the main discharge pump. So basically you pump this and the fuel comes out of this main discharge hole right here. So let me just show you. You press it down, see all those air bubbles and gas come up. So this is a pump, but it is very hard to take this apart and reassemble it, and I'll show you why. It's because this pump right here runs all the way down to these linkages on the bottom, and they're extremely hard to hook back up once you take it apart again. But the Carburetor Rebuild Kit comes with one, so I would recommend you do it, but it is very challenging. I found you have to grab this with the pliers, pull it down, hook it up, twist this around in some super goofy ways. You'll figure it out if you're at it long enough, but very hard to do for me. So the first thing we're going to take out is this idle tube. Basically you can take it out with a pick and then kind of grab it. It's a little challenging, but you can get it. Oh, almost had it. That's what this looks like. You're going to want to make sure that this is see-through all the way. You know, stick something down in there. I have this little needle here, and what I'll do is basically maybe blow some air through there or stick a needle through. Make sure it comes out, kind of run it up and down. Make sure that this is perfectly clean. I've heard people using wire brushes. Just take a little bristle, pluck one out, and run it through. That works equally as well, but make sure that this is clean before you throw it back in. And then you can also blow down there, throw some carb clean down there, and that should do the trick. And this is the answer for a lot of the issues with idling. I would even go as far as putting a new fill filter on, new fuel lines. Make sure no crap is getting into this carburetor, because one little speck of dirt that gets in there and the truck won't idle. So make sure that this is perfectly clean. And then we're going to take our main discharge assembly out, and that just is pressed in there like a little T, and then a spring comes out. And then there's also a little steel ball down there. You could take that out by tipping the carburetor inside out. So like I said before, how this is linked up down on the linkage right here. This one is too. So these two go hand in hand with each other in order to move that butterfly on the bottom portion of this carburetor. So that is pretty much it for the top end of this carburetor. There are some ports in here that you're gonna wanna make sure that are super clean in and out. And then let's jump to the bottom side here, and I wanna show you another factor that can be leading to your truck not idling. So another portion to the idle circuit, obviously the carburetor is flipped upside down, is this little tiny port right there. That is part of the idle circuit. So flip your carburetor upside down, get in there with some wire or picks, and make sure that it's completely clean. Maybe get some carburetor cleaner and squirt a bunch in there. Make sure that is completely clean. That is all part of your idle circuit, and if you do not have that clean, your truck will not idle properly. You won't be able to adjust your vacuum right here. It's just a pain. So make sure that is completely clean. Double, triple check. I've already had to do that multiple times. So yeah, that's just another thing that I wanted to point out for the idle circuit. But yeah, let's flip this thing back over and get to reassembly. So we're going to start putting our idle jet in here. Just feeds down. Make sure that is sitting flush. And then we can assemble our main discharge port. Basically, you're going to drop this little steel ball in there. And then there is a little copper spring, it looks like. And then always, too, when you get a carb kit, make sure that you're using all your new stuff, obviously. And then this little T here goes inside the spring and then is press fitted in there like that. And you can take a screwdriver, make sure that is completely flushed out. And then we're going to put our float together. So this is kind of a weird shaped little wire here. But basically it just clips around there and then it hangs. It doesn't hang right here. I thought it hung right here, but it doesn't. It actually hangs right here. And if you put it on the other way, your fuel will leak, so don't do that. And then we are going to grab our little hanger right here, slide it through the holes, and then you can just drop it down, making sure, oops. So once you have your float installed, making sure that your needle is hooked in the right position and is in the main jet correctly, you're gonna wanna check your float height. And how you do that is super simple. Basically, you're gonna press down on the end of the float here, and then you'll be able to feel it like bottom out right right there. You'll be able to feel it. You're gonna take a caliper and measure using the end of the caliper, or sometimes the carb kits come with an actual gauge that you can use. But basically you're gonna wanna bottom it out and take the end of the caliper like this. Make sure that float is bottom out, and then you're gonna take a reading using your caliper from the surface, from the mating surface to the top of the float here. So we're sitting right around 0.34 inches. And that is, let's see, that is 8.72 millimeters. It's kind of where you want to be around. So the truck runs good right now, so I'm going to leave it. So that is how you check float height on this carburetor. That goes along with a lot of other carburetors. The cool thing about these old ones is they're all kind of somewhat the same. Obviously, they're all different in their own ways, but these monojets, there's different variations of these monojets, and a lot of the info here that I'm sharing bounces over to the other monojet carburetors, as far as like idle circuits and whatnot. So it's pretty simple. So it's pretty much it for the top end of the carburetor. I'm gonna throw everything back on, and then we'll go from there. Forgot to put my gasket on, LOL. So while you guys are here and we have a good look at this idle stop solenoid, I want to kind of share a few things in my experience with one of these. So right here, obviously this is your idle stop solenoid, hooks up to a wire, and then when it is energized, say you guys have AC or you're cruising down the highway and then you hit full throttle on the gas pedal and let off again, basically your carburetor is getting zero fuel. And so what this does is when your throttle opens up, your choke is off. This will be off. When your choke is off, your throttle is open, and then it snaps back. That could cause your truck to stall. So when that plunger in there is energized, it actually pops out a little bit. And so when it comes back, it stops like right about here, and then it eases it back off down to an idle. So that way your truck stays running. And then obviously when your choke is on, your truck is idling at that position right there. But actually what I ended up doing is, I don't know if this is bad, I guess I could test it, but I actually ended up just unplugging it, and then you can set the idle. So when your choke is off here, it is idling at that position right there. And so if you guys want to up your idle speed, you basically run this whole solenoid in, and then that lever it actuates the throttle lever. So if you guys want a higher idle, turn it in. If you want to back it off, turn it out. Pretty straightforward there. Then I want to talk about this choke, this electronic choke. So basically it just plugs in kind of like this solenoid would. And then when you fire your truck up and it's cold, it runs like this in this position here. And then when your idle turns off, basically you just hit the throttle, blip the throttle. This will go all the way forward and come back down to a lower idle speed. So that is how the electronic choke works. So basically when you fire your truck up, sits right there, blip the throttle, comes all the way down to there. So pretty straightforward. When you guys set this back up on the truck, you're gonna want to have your idle, you're gonna want to have your choke all the way on, obviously because your engine is cold, and so you just have it there on the H. I love that your only tool with one of these is a flat blade screwdriver. It's wonderful. So now we have our carburetor reassembled. We're going to do a manifold vacuum test. And what a manifold vacuum test is, it is considered a manifold because we're going to be pulling vacuum from the bottom here. If we're doing a ported vacuum test, we're going to be doing it from the top. But for this system, we're doing a manifold. And you're going to want to pick up one of these gauges, super cheap, from O'Reilly's Auto Parts store. And basically, we're going to slap the carburetor back onto the truck. And then we're going to take this cap off here, hook up our vacuum line, and then we are going to turn this screw here all the way in. Once it's bottomed out, don't go too tight, but once it's bottomed out, we're going to turn it 2 turns out as a starting point. So that's 1 turn, 2 turns. So that is our starting point. And basically the goal here is to fire the truck up. And so this is measured in inch mercury. And so we're going to try to get the highest vacuum reading we possibly can, but making sure that it's a steady vacuum reading. And if it's super high and it's bouncing back and forth, we want to lower it back down to get a steady vacuum reading. You'll kind of figure it out as you go, but This is a super good test to run by making sure there are no vacuum leaks within this system. So yeah, we're gonna take this back outside and then pop this on the truck and do a vacuum pressure test. So now we have our carburetor hooked up, we have our vacuum gauge also installed. We're gonna fire the truck up. Now, a good idle speed is roughly around 600 RPM. If you guys have an RPM gauge, you guys can do a reading off of that, and then adjust your idle stop solenoid at the back to the RPMs. But right now we're pulling roughly around 12 to 13, 12 and a half. And we're gonna turn the screwdriver in and out and see what the difference is here. So it's going up to 13. If you guys don't see a big change, that's alright. You do want to see a change though for going back down. So we are right around 12 and a half, 13, maybe 12 inch mercury, which is a good reading as long as it's steady. You want to make sure that it's steady, it's not going up and down. So we're going to leave it right there, and then that's pretty much it. Turn the truck off. There you guys have it. That is how you clean a Rochester Monojet. But yeah, that's gonna wrap it up for today's video. I hope you guys learned something. If you did, please share it with a buddy. That helps me out. But anyways, I'm gonna get out of here. I hope you guys have a good rest of the day. We'll talk to you guys later. Peace out.